It was supposed to be just another peaceful afternoon in the small farming town of Miller's Creek. 8-year-old Ellie had been playing near the edge of the cornfield behind her family's home, like she had done countless times before. Her mom, Claire, could see her from the kitchen window barefoot, giggling, chasing the wind through rows of golden stalks. But when Claire called her in for dinner, Ellie didn't answer. Within minutes, the cornfield was silent and Ellie had vanished. Without a trace, the town came together in search. Neighbors, police, even dogs combed the fields and nearby woods. Flyers were posted, news crews arrived, and days turned into weeks. But nothing was found. No footprints, no torn clothing, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the earth had simply swallowed Ellie whole. Claire and her husband tried to keep hope alive, but as months passed, hope turned into heartbreak. Eventually, people stopped searching. Life in Miller's Creek moved on, but Claire never did. 10 years later, Claire still lived on the same farm, now alone. She kept Ellie's room exactly the way it was. And every now and then, she'd wander to the edge of the cornfield and stare into the distance, wondering what she missed. But everything changed one rainy morning when she went to feed the pigs. Inside the old barn, silent for years, she noticed something strange in the far corner, something buried under hay and thyme. Claire stepped closer, heart pounding. And that's when she saw it. Claire knelt down slowly, brushing aside the old hay with trembling hands. Her breath caught when she saw what was underneath an old pink hair ribbon, faded and dirty, but unmistakably Ellie's. Claire's heart thudded in her chest. That ribbon had been in her daughter's hair the day she disappeared. For 10 years, she had believed Ellie vanished in the cornfield, far from the barn. But now, this tiny clue shifted everything. She stood up shakily, her eyes scanning the dusty corners of the barn. The pig stalls had been empty for years, ever since her husband left and she stopped farming. Nothing had moved in that space for nearly a decade. So how had the ribbon ended up there? And why now? Memories came rushing back: Ellie's laughter, her muddy shoes, the way she always tried to sneak into the barn even when Claire told her not to. She used to say there was something special about it. Something secret. Claire's fingers gripped the ribbon tight as she stepped deeper into the shadows of the barn. The air grew heavier, the light dimmer. One of the old boards on the back wall looked loose. Something about it felt off, like it didn't belong. She reached for it, heart pounding, when a sudden creak came from behind her. Claire spun around, startled, but no one was there. That's when she realized if Ellie had been here, then someone else had been too, and maybe still was. Claire backed toward the barn door, her fingers still clutching Ellie's ribbon. Her heart thudded in her ears as she scanned every inch of the dim interior. The creak she'd heard couldn't have been the wind. Everything was still, the heavy air unmoving. She stepped outside, locking the door behind her, and stared out at the quiet farm. For 10 years, she'd believed Ellie had wandered off into the cornfield, maybe taken by a stranger. But now, she couldn't help but wonder, had her daughter ever left the property at all? That night, Claire pulled out an old notebook where she'd once documented every detail of the days after Ellie vanished. Rereading it, things she'd overlooked started to stand out. She remembered the dog barking near the barn on the second night, something she'd dismissed at the time. And the old farmhand, Joe, who quit suddenly a week after Ellie disappeared, saying nothing, just vanished. From town? Claire hadn't thought much of him then, but now she couldn't shake the feeling that he'd known something. Determined, she drove to the sheriff's office the next morning with the ribbon. But when she asked about reopening the case, the deputy looked hesitant. "We looked into everything back then," he said carefully. "You sure this isn't just grief talking?" Claire left frustrated, but more certain than ever. Ellie hadn't vanished into thin air. Someone knew the truth, and she was done waiting for answers. The barn had secrets, and it was time to dig deeper. Literally. Claire waited until nightfall. The deputy hadn't taken her seriously, and no one else in town wanted to revisit a 10-year-old mystery. So she grabbed a flashlight, gloves, and a crowbar, and returned to the barn alone. The silence out there felt heavier than usual, as if the land itself was holding its breath. She stepped inside and made her way to the back wall, where that loose board had caught her eye. With a deep breath, Claire wedged the crowbar between the planks. The wood groaned as it gave way, revealing a narrow gap behind the wall. She aimed the flashlight through it and gasped. A small hidden space, almost like a crawl space, was tucked behind the wall, long and narrow, lined with old hay and rusted tools. She pulled more boards free until she could squeeze through. Inside, the air was damp and stale. The flashlight beam shook in her hand as she scanned the area. Dust danced in the light. Then she saw its scratches on the wooden beams, like small hands had clawed at them. Claire's throat tightened, and in the corner, something metal glinted. She moved closer and found an old locket, half buried in dirt. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a tiny photo Ellie at age 4, smiling. Suddenly, she heard a soft creak from outside the barn. Footsteps. Claire froze. She wasn't alone. Someone else knew about this space, and they'd just come back. Claire turned off the flashlight and held her breath, pressing herself against the cold wall of the hidden space. The barn door creaked again, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps across the wooden floor. Whoever it was didn't speak. They moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were going. She could see a sliver of movement through the cracks boots. A flashlight beam sweeping across the stalls. Claire's heart pounded so loudly she feared it would give her away. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside the crawl space. A low voice spoke. "You shouldn't have come back here, Claire." Our blood ran cold. She recognized it. Jotha, old farmhand. The one who left without a word after Ellie vanished. "You were supposed to forget," he said, as if talking to himself. "It was never supposed to go this far." Claire remained frozen, the locket still clutched in her hand. Joe walked away. Slowly, but she didn't move until she was sure he'd left the barn. When she finally crawled out, she checked her phone. No service. Her truck keys were gone. He had taken them back inside the house. Claire locked every door and dug through a box of old papers. She found an old pay stub with Joe's last known address. But what caught her eye was a second name listed on the payroll, someone she hadn't thought about in years. A woman named Sandra, Ellie's old babysitter. She'd disappeared the same week Ellie did. Claire drove through the night in a neighbor's truck, following the address on Joe's old pay stub to a worn-down cabin just outside the county line. The place looked abandoned, windows boarded and overgrown with vines. But a faint light flickered inside. She parked far off the road and approached on foot, keeping low. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back. But the image of Ellie's locket pushed her forward. Inside the cabin, Claire peered through a crack. In the wooden boards, what she saw stopped her cold. Joe sat at the table, speaking quietly to someone. Across from him, hunched under a thick blanket, was a young woman, frail, but unmistakably familiar. Her eyes, her posture, even the small scar on her chin. It was Ellie. Claire couldn't breathe. 10 years, her daughter was alive. She burst through the door, shouting Ellie's name. Joe stood, shocked, but didn't move fast enough. Claire ran to her daughter, who stared at her with wide, confused eyes. "Mom?" Ellie whispered, before Claire could respond. Another voice came from the back room, soft, tired. Sandra stepped into view, aged and worn. "We didn't hurt her," she said. "We took her to protect her." Joe found something in your husband's past. Someone was coming for her. Claire reeled, stunned. Her husband had died in an accident 2 years after Ellie disappeared. But Sandra's words echoed in her mind. She wasn't the one they wanted. She was just the one who remembered too much. Claire sat on the floor of the cabin, holding Ellie close for the first time in a decade. Her daughter trembled in her arms, still trying to understand what was real and what wasn't. Joe sat quietly in the corner, staring at his hands, while Sandra explained everything. Years ago, Claire's late husband had gotten involved in something he shouldn't have: land deals. People with power and secrets buried deep. Ellie had overheard something she repeated at the dinner table. That night, Joe overheard it too, and he knew what it meant. Someone might come for the little girl who said too much. Sandra and Joe had acted in panic, believing they were protecting her. They hadn't planned to keep Ellie hidden forever, but then the search turned national, and fear kept them quiet. Sandra cared for Ellie as her own, raising her in secret, homeschooling her, keeping her far from anything familiar. Claire didn't forgive them easily. But she couldn't deny that Ellie was safe and alive. The authorities were called. Investigations reopened. No charges were filed against Sandra or Joe, but they both quietly left the county after testifying. Claire brought Ellie home, slowly helping her rediscover the life she'd lost. The cornfield stood tall again that summer, golden and still. Ellie no longer feared it. She walked its edge with her mother, hand in hand, stronger now.